Well, I went back to Japan. I once again answered the siren nerd call of exported pop culture that I'm sure so many of us feel, but this time I couldn't help but shake the feeling that a lot of what makes Japan so fun for us tourists to visit kind of comes at their expense. There's so many cheap little entertainment businesses everywhere. Things like the arcades, the batting cages, the animal cafes, and karaoke all seem so abundant, maybe because a typical Japanese lifestyle doesn't allow for a lot of that kind of fun to be had at home. And after reaching a certain later age demographic, it's likely that your typical Japanese lifestyle may lead to someone spending a lot of their golden years outside of the home at a pachinko parlor instead, which is a huge 19 trillion yen industry in Japan. That makes it bigger than their arcade industry, bigger than their comic industry, and despite that, it's only really popular among the 50-plus crowd, with customers under 30 making just 9% of the audience, according to data from 2014. These numbers suggest an aspect of the Japanese economy that pop culture often glosses over, which is the sheer size of their older population. It's weird seeing older demographics be a profitable market for this kind of sleek, noisy pop culture entertainment. Last year, I made a video about pachinko parlors, and try as I might, I could not find a single parlor shelling out the controversy du jour of the time, which was the Silent Hill machine that so eloquently asks you to hit the lever. This year, the black spot on everyone's consciousness is the Metal Gear Solid 3 machine, an almost perfect passive-aggressive insult to Konami's and Metal Gear's legacy by landing the branded machine on the fan favorite of the series. Metal Gear Solid 3 didn't even sell as well as the others. Hell, it technically didn't even outscore them, but among fans, the space it occupies is kind of a sacred cow out of the series lineup. Of all the marketable games Konami could have turned into a gambling machine for old people, why the hell did they pick number 3? For that matter, I have to wonder how much of a stake Konami has in pachinko in general in the grand scheme of things, because once again I tried as I might to find this thing and came up empty-handed at least for a few days. I don't think Konami actually has a partnership deal with the biggest or the most visible pachi parlors that populate the most tourism-friendly districts of Tokyo. I went into a few of the Aeon, Gaia, and Big Apple parlors. Those are the ones you can tell are pachi parlors from the outside, but inside there were no Konami brands stamped on their machines. So, in order to keep them from making any more money off this machine, and because I want to hear some funny stories of people trying to find it anyway, I don't want to specify exactly where we did eventually find the Metal Gear Solid 3 Pachislots. On the way there, I had a conversation that'll confirm to all of you what a big, dumb, strange weirdo I am, because after spending a few hours last year at Pachi Parlors, I came to accept something as normal that maybe I shouldn't have, and that is how loud these places get. George, it's too loud in here. We're gonna damage our ears. What do we do? Wait, hold up. You guys didn't bring a Ziploc sandwich bag in the earplugs like a normal person would? I mean, duh. I gotta give 100% of the credibility to my Finnish friend Patrick, who somehow speaks fluent Japanese. He managed to communicate through all of this noise to a lady behind the counter. He asked her where the Metal Gear Solid machines were, and she sprang up and said, "Ah, Metal Gear!" She did a dance. She did a Metal Gear dance. I don't know what the deal with the dance was. All I could glean from it was that Metal Gear means something very different to this little old lady working behind the counter at Apache Parlor than it does to the rest of us.
Do the monkey with me! Come on!
I don't know if the dance was supposed to look like she was being a big giant armed robot, or if she was sneaking through the bushes, but she went to the back of the counter, she got on a computer and looked us up some Metal Gear machines and directed us to a competing Pachi parlor for a different company across the street, because Japan. And sure enough, there it was. An anticlimactic and shameless gleam of light at the end of this tunnel, a single Metal Gear machine humbly peeping out of the greasy glow of broken dreams. And at the time, it was occupied by a grumpy-ass business suit man who stayed on it all day and clearly wanted us gone. But a day later, I was able to start feeding the machine $10 bills and experience this downward spiral myself. To paraphrase my pachinko video from last year, most game-branded Patchy machines are actually Pachislots instead of Pachinko, which means they're basically just slot machines. An LCD screen plays a looping 4-second video that progresses further through an episodic story as you get lucky enough to land some good rolls, some of which occasionally ask you to mash the single win game button on the machine, in this case styled after the codec call prompt, for a big bonus of tokens that can be used to play more or to exchange for such luxurious prizes as a small bottle of household cleaning spray. So getting to the end is basically a test of patience above all else, as putting more and more money into the machine doesn't increase your odds in the short term. Shoving more $10 bills in to see if you can even make it to the end is more of a long-term investment, as it can take hours to fulfill the probability of landing enough good rolls to see the story progress. And the Metal Gear Solid 3 machine doesn't really deviate from that formula. I guess it has a slightly smaller screen, but the subtleties that really do separate it from the rest are an even more perfect storm of grimy, greedy awfulness. And a lot of that actually has to do with how good it looks. These are FMVs styled as real-time Fox Engine renders, but they depressingly nail the look of what a real remake of MGS3 would look like, which is damn near spot on in tone with the original, except for the decisive aesthetic choice that characters will tend to look quite older and grayer than they did back in the PS2 days. But I couldn't believe how many little unnecessary stylistic details made it through, like the tiny little unreadable text on the guards' masks. That's the kind of dedication that shows that somehow the studio behind this project had an actual passion for this project. The kind of passion that made sure they included bastardized Pachislot versions of everything. From the codec calls to the injury healing system to the original Harry Gregson Williams score to the same little beeps and chirps from the menus to the point where your slot drum is looping through a scroll of the freaking survival viewer. They even mutated the boss battles into this thing, which brings me to the second serrated tooth of this knife they're twisting in me here. Just think about that. Boss battles in a slot machine. Ah! How do you translate the blow-by-blow one-on-one combat of a boss fight into a medium where the only input the player can give is time? I don't know if we missed something here, but it seems like you just watch two characters take chunks off each other's health bars by the sheer luck of where your slot machine roll happens to land. And we lost! We lost the slot machine boss battle after 30 minutes of rolling past the same 4-second scenes that loop over and over and over again until you get the good enough rolls to get past them. We lost the slot machine boss battle and got thrown back all the way to the very, very beginning. Ah! And the longevity of that process is what makes the MGS3 Pachislots even more offensive than the regular adaptations. This is one of the slower, one of the more uneventful machines I've played. Losing that boss battle happened 30 minutes in, sending us back half an hour earlier to the repeating 4-second loops we saw as soon as the first token was dropped. The 1,000 yen bill I shoved in lasted us an hour, and while you could argue that that's good value to time proposition, it's all malleable. There was a, unfortunately named difficulty setting that you can change on the machine to ramp things up, to speed things up a bit, without it really asking much more out of you, because you're not going to make much progress for your money either way. You kind of just change it to change the estimated time of arrival for whatever scene that 1,000 yen note is going to land you on anyway. This YouTube channel for a French fan site, Metal Gear Solid B, recorded cell phone footage archiving the about 40 minutes of story cutscenes that are in this thing. But between those, you have these intermediary 4-second sneaking loops that are meant to connect one lucky spin to another, frequently interrupted by these anachronistic, chibi animated scenes showing stuff that I remember happening way later in the story. These seem to be triggered by you being discovered by enemy troops, which gives some semblance of a sneaking theme to your slot machine rolls. Most of your individual slot machine rolls will be given the appearance of minigames along your way to the eventual CIA director cutscene that's just about the one big cutscene they didn't bother to remake at all. And for what it's worth, I couldn't make it there. Me and my friends, we gave up. We got out of there. We couldn't keep going. This guy did, but I, on the other hand, was not willing to spend the time and the money it takes to get there, because then I'd be glued on that machine all day and I'd probably be out of spending money as well. Because of all the weird Pachislot adaptations that I have played, which is, like, I don't know, 3 of them, this is actually one of the more slower and uneventful machines that really has you sitting there all day, and that actually was not what I was expecting. 1,000 yen, which is about $10, buys you an hour here of pressing the same 3 buttons over and over again, hoping that something cool happens on the screen, and usually it doesn't, but that kind of explains how these places are able to get old people to spend entire days in here. I, on the other hand, wanted to go. I've never wanted to lose a video game harder in my life, and the game wouldn't let me. The worst part about that situation was that there weren't even any windows in the building to jump out of. So, also during this trip, I went to a game dev meetup. I was invited to a room in the back of a restaurant full of English-speaking expats who all work in the industry. I struck up a conversation with one of them who turned out to be a journalist that covers gaming events in Japan, and I asked them what the consensus was among local Japanese gamers, what they think about these instances of old beloved franchises getting turned into gray market gambling. They said it's patronizing. They said that, well, pachinko is something unknowable for us Westerners that's not for us and probably will never be for us, and that's disappointing. It's kind of a distant, impersonal kind of disappointment. But for Japanese gamers, pachinko is something that's been characterized as being just for old people, so it's not just something that's not for them, but actually for an older audience that didn't grow up with games, so it's adding kind of an element of patronizing softness to the transformation that the company's doing with the brand. For comparison, imagine Metal Gear Solid Shuffleboard, Metal Gear Solid Prune Juice, Metal Gear Solid Bingo Night at the Old Folks' Home. Which would seem to explain why some quick Google translated comments underneath some news of international fans' reactions suggest that this stuff actually makes Japanese fans as mad, if not more, than it does Western fans. It seems that the president and employees of Konami feel shameful in making TV games, but is Pachislot good? I think that Pachislot is much shameful. Who wants this? Do not Pachislot from Japan! Some people say that this is the right corporate image that pursues profits. It seems to me just, as I am struggling toward suicide.